Hi everyone. We just released an API for RagMetrics, which lets you test your entire LLM application, including the retrieval step. Let me show you how it works. We're going to start with the label dataset. The label dataset includes some sample inputs or user questions that you might expect for your conversational AI bot. It will also include the correct answers that you would like the system to deliver and some correct contexts or sources. And we're going to take those one by one and feed them into your pipeline through our API. So we will provide a certain JSON input into your pipeline. And that input will include the question as well as some A/B test parameters, if any. And then your pipeline is going to give back a JSON output to us, which will include the generated answer and the retrieved contexts. So you can have as much complexity in your code as you like, and all we need to get is the final result. And then we're going to collate all of those. We're going to evaluate them and then create an A/B report that you can then use to optimize your pipeline. So you can actually make some decisions. Let's see what it looks like in the product. So here we are in RagMetrics, and you'll notice that every user now has an API demo. There's actually two demos. Let's take a look at the first one. This is just a stub, and what the stub does is it returns the same output no matter what the input is. Let's actually test it, and we see that the test is passed. That's good. Here is the input that we sent to this endpoint. This is an extensible format. We can have lots of other parameters in the experiment, and you can use those to make switches in your code. We'll demonstrate how to do that. And then the output is the generated answer. It is the context that I retrieved. So this is a list, and the list has some metadata and content for each context. And then we have the LLM response. Okay, so now that we have the stub working, let's keep working on the scenario that we set up earlier, which is our customer service data. So if you'll recall, our customer service data has 5 questions from customers of an online retailer. And these are questions like, hi, I ordered a set of kitchen knives from your store 2 weeks ago. I haven't received them, etc. And each question has some ground truth context, which is the correct source that we would like our system to retrieve. So in this case, if the question has to do with late shipping, then the correct context would be the shipping policy. Let's actually download this data, and we'll take the ground truth contexts and put them into a file. We will use the same context to build our retrieval system. So here we have an Excel sheet. We just downloaded this data. Here are the ground truth answers, and here are the ground truth contexts. And if we look at each one of these, we will have the correct policy. So we're just going to copy those, and we're going to paste them right into our code. We'll put quotes around them. And here you'll see that I pasted it into Replit. The reason that I like Replit is because it lets you set up a web server for free, which you cannot do with Colab, but it's a very similar kind of environment. And so here, the first thing that we did is we put in our knowledge base, and it's just a list of strings, the same data that we saw in the Excel spreadsheet. So now, let me just walk you guys through what this code does. It's pretty simple. We have our RAG method, which takes a JSON input and returns a JSON output similar to what we saw in the slide. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to parse a couple of variables out of the input. We're going to get the question, which is in the row element, and we're going to get the retrieval strategy. That's going to be the A/B test parameter. And all we're going to do is, if the retrieval strategy in the parameter above is random, then let's retrieve a random context. On the other hand, if the retrieval strategy is going to be embeddings, then let's retrieve using embeddings. Otherwise, we'll throw an error. That is pretty much the entire code. When we have done creating the answer, we're going to write the response in the output format that is required by the API, which is basically 3 keys. It is the generated answer, the contexts, and the LLM response. Only the generated answer is required. The other two are optional. Let's actually run it. And Replit is going to stand this up, and we have our endpoint. And now what I'd like to do is plug it into our RagMetrics platform. We're going to copy the URL and we're going to paste it into a new, let's create a RAG endpoint. We will call it my LLM pipeline. We're going to paste the endpoint right here, add the key. Now let's test it to make sure that it works. And it does work. So we have our particular input, which is the standard input that the tester sends in. And then we have some output. There's some information about receipts, etc. Now let's actually run an experiment to see how both switches in the API are working. So we're going to go back to our experiments. This is the same experiment that we used in the previous video, but this time, instead of testing a system prompt, we're just going to be testing our pipeline. So let's select the model pipeline. And what we're really interested in is what the context relevance is, which is going to compare the context that the pipeline retrieved against the gold context that we have in our data set. But we actually want to trigger the switch that we created earlier, whether the retrieval is going to be random or using embeddings. So what we'll do here is we'll create another experimental cohort. In the first one, let's use retrieval of random. And in the second one, let's use retrieval strategy of embeddings. And the way that is going to connect to our code is the retrieval strategy is going to be parsed in from the input right here. And then if it's random, it's going to trigger random retrieval. And if it's following embeddings, it's going to do retrieval using embeddings. So there's really no magic there. We can use any parameter that we like. The parameter of retrieval strategy is defined within our code, and we're also defining it within the A/B test. So now we have our two cohorts that we just created. The first one is called random retrieval. The second one is called embeddings retrieval. They both use the same LLM pipeline. And the criteria that we want is context relevance. Let's run the experiment. We have our experiment results. The random retrieval generated a context relevance of 3 out of 5 and embeddings 5 out of 5. Let's take a look at some of these examples. Like in this case, both random and the embeddings retrieved the right one. And so they both got a score of 5. However, in most cases, you could see, here we go. Here's a question about a coffee maker. So the random retrieval is bringing back the policy about shipping, and the embeddings retrieval is bringing back the policy about appliances and the warranty, which is the correct one. We have a 1 for the random and a 5 for the retrieval. That is the end of the demo. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Of course, you can use this API to A/B test many other things about your pipeline, including switching out the LLM that you want to build on, switching out vector databases, trying different re-rankers, and the sky's really the limit. If you'd like to try out this feature, please drop me a line at ragmetrics.ai. Thank you.